Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex psychology behind our human relationships. We'll look at everything from why we completely miss those glaring toxic red flags to the literal neuroscience of heartbreak, and crucially, how we actually heal from it all.
We'll be moving chronologically through the life cycle of a challenging relationship today. That means covering the roots of our relationship patterns, spotting covert narcissists, using the gray rock method, looking at your brain on heartbreak, navigating the stages of healing, and finally, building healthier connections.
All right, Section 1, Roots of Relationship Patterns, How Childhood Shapes Adulthood. To really understand why relationships fail, we actually have to look backward.
Research published in the International Journal of Indian Psychology highlights a supercritical point here. Childhood emotional abuse severely impacts how young adults process their relationships. And unlike physical abuse, emotional invalidation is often really subtle. It can even be completely normalized, especially in hierarchical family structures where obedience and emotional restraint are pushed heavily.
This early emotional invalidation disrupts what's called our mentalization capacity, basically our ability to understand our own mental states and the mental states of others. And this leaves us incredibly vulnerable to maladaptive relationship patterns. It causes emotional dysregulation and diminished emotional insight. And what's wild is that, contrary to popular belief, this trauma might actually cause hyperindependence rather than codependency. Because we normalize invalidating behaviors so early on, we literally lose the psychological ability to spot relational warning signs.
Which naturally leads us to a pretty vital question. What happens when our absolute inability to spot red flags leads us directly into the arms of a toxic partner? Well, if childhood trauma blinds us to the warning signs, we might unknowingly stumble right into dynamics with highly manipulative people.
So Section 2, Spotting Covert Narcissists, the Hidden Threat. Let's look at how this specific type of personality disorder operates.
Look at the stark contrast here. When we think of a narcissist, we usually picture the overt type, right? Someone loud, boastful, always seeking the spotlight, outright aggressive when challenged. But the covert or vulnerable narcissist is completely different. They hide behind this introverted, reserved demeanor, which makes their manipulations so much harder to detect until you're already deeply invested in the relationship.
The absolutely crucial point here is that covert narcissists feed their incredibly fragile self-esteem by playing the victim constantly. They view themselves fatalistically, like the world is just out to get them. They're highly neurotic and negative. But instead of outward rage, they use passive-aggressive vengeance. Think, giving you the cold shoulder or withholding information. It's all designed to shift the blame onto you and slowly, methodically drain your energy.
Which begs the question. How on earth do you protect your peace when you find yourself trapped with an emotions vampire? Confronting a covert narcissist directly almost always backfires, so you really need a specialized psychological tool.
And that brings us to Section 3, the gray rock method, starving the narcissistic supply. Let's get into this highly effective, though temporary, coping strategy.
So, the gray rock method is a behavioral modification technique, and it's based on the psychological concept of extinction. Here's the deal. Narcissists thrive on getting a rise out of you. That's their narcissistic supply. By totally suppressing your emotional responses and making yourself as uninteresting and unremarkable as a literal gray rock, you effectively starve them of the emotional reactions they so desperately crave.
To actually pull this off, you need to follow 3 steps. Step 1, play it close to the chest. Do not reveal you're using this method. Keep it a total secret. Step 2, practice emotional detachment. Just give bland, short, non-committal one-word answers. And step 3, be distracted and disengaged. Avoid eye contact, maintain totally neutral body language. Eventually, they'll just lose interest and leave you alone.
Okay, but what happens when the relationship finally ends? Why does the breakup feel like a literal physical blow? Because even if a relationship was terribly toxic, the eventual separation triggers an intense, agonizing biological response in our bodies.
Welcome to Section 4, Your Brain on Heartbreak, the neuroscience of rejection. Let's break down why this pain isn't just all in your head.
MRI scans reveal something absolutely astounding. When you look at a photo of an ex-partner, the exact same regions of your brain light up as if you were experiencing actual physical pain. Literally, like a hot probe touching your arm. Specifically, your insula and anterior cingulate cortex activate because your brain is interpreting emotional rejection as an evolutionary threat to your survival. No wonder it hurts so much.
Furthermore, your brain is experiencing a massive drop in dopamine in its reward centers, specifically the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. As Dr. Lucy Brown perfectly summarizes here, you experience cravings for an ex-partner in the exact same way an addict craves a drug they're withdrawing from. It's a literal neurochemical withdrawal.
But hey, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that magic number is 10. Studies show that despite this intense biological distress, most young adults report feeling significantly less distressed after about 10 weeks.
Getting to that point of relief requires a psychological journey, which brings us to Section 5, the stages of healing, navigating the grief.
Much like grief, heartbreak is rarely perfectly linear, but you're generally going to transition through these stages. You go from initial shock and absolute numbness on day 1 to visceral pain and anger in week 1. By month 1, you often hit periods of bargaining and depression. And yeah, that brings deep emotional lows, but also vital introspection. Finally, as you cross that 10-week mark, you eventually reach acceptance and profound personal growth.
So, once we've healed, how do we ensure our future relationships don't just repeat the mistakes of our past? The final step in this whole life cycle is actively developing the tools required to foster deep, reciprocal connections.
And to stop those toxic patterns from recurring, we have to change how we communicate. Here's Section 6, Building Healthier Connections, the Power of Active Listening.
Active listening is essentially built on 5 pillars. First, genuine interest, which means valuing curiosity over just sitting there preparing your next comeback. Second, remember that listening does not equal agreement. Your focus is on understanding, not winning a debate. Third, acknowledge feelings by separating the emotions from the facts. Fourth, listen to yourself by setting strong boundaries to avoid burnout. And fifth, and this is a real game changer, clarifying your partner's unstated needs by simply asking, do you want to be hugged, heard, or helped right now?
Ultimately, recognizing red flags and surviving heartbreak, it really transforms us. Healing isn't just about forgetting the pain, it's about learning how to connect with newfound wisdom. So armed with this new psychological toolkit, I'll leave you with a provocative question to ponder. How will you protect your peace, and how will you listen differently today?